Welcome to Beyond the Blend, the podcast that goes behind the science and talks to the people at the heart of the lubricant market, telling the real story of the people who make the lubricant market move. With real insight and honest conversations, we aim to show off the people side from across the entire lubricant supply chain. Join me, Steve Knapp, and Rob Taylor as we delve behind the scenes of the lubricant industry. Let's go. So let's start with a quick 5 from 5. Mike, is it a late night or an early morning?
As a father of a toddler, I'm not sure I have a choice on the early morning, but probably more of a late night, I would say.
Yeah, preference, but not always. Not always what you're going to get. Books or movies?
Movies, probably.
Movies?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Anything good recently?
Actually, recently, I've been getting back into not necessarily a movie, but the TV show. We've started rewatching Peaky Blinders because of the new film that's coming out. So both me and the wife have started watching that recently.
A casual barbecue or a formal sit-down dinner?
Casual barbecue.
Video games or board games?
Video games.
A lazy Sunday or a full-on Sunday?
Ooh, that's a good one. It really kind of depends a little bit because there are Sundays where you just want to wake up nice and slow, relax, have a nice breakfast, maybe go for a casual walk somewhere. But then, I come from a family with lots of nieces, nephews, brothers, sisters. So, when we all do get together, I suppose it's nice to have that bit of chaos going on and to feel that. So, yeah, a bit of both.
Okay, well that's unusual. We allow that, but I think with the justification we can do that. So
Fine.
Look, everybody, welcome back to Beyond the Blend. And today I'm joined by Mike Davidson, Sales and Marketing Director at Klüber Lubrication, Great Britain. Mike's career has spanned pumps, fluid technology, valves, now speciality lubricants, with chapters at SPP Pumps, Armstrong Fluid Technology, Oliver Valves, and now Klüber. It's a journey that's not only crossed sectors, but borders too, including 5 years I read in Doha with responsibility across Qatar, Iraq, Lebanon, and Pakistan. So in this episode, we'll talk about how that journey began, what the international side of his career taught him, and how those experiences have shaped his views on leadership, customer value, and maybe even the future of lubrication. So, Mike, welcome to Beyond the Blend. It's great to have you here. Please just take a moment to introduce yourself to our Beyond the Blend listeners.
Yeah, so first I'll say thank you for having me. Really good to be here. I'm Mike Davidson. I am relatively new into the direct lubrication industry. I've always worked around it in my career. But yeah, I mean, I'm from Manchester, Bolton to be specific. I was born and bred here up until an age. I left the UK when I was about 5 or 6 years old due to my dad's career. And my dad's career took us a little bit around the world. And I didn't return to the UK until I was about 16. So for a significant portion of my early life, I actually spent a lot of it in the Middle East, which was interesting. You mentioned earlier how I've obviously spent some time in Doha in my professional career since. Did most of my primary education, secondary education in the Middle East. Returned to the UK at 16. Obviously went all the way through to university from there. Graduated in business information management, and then kind of got stuck into things. And everyone has a choice of where we go, but I think a lot of influence around where I went with my career was actually from my dad. And being in that mechanical engineering type environment really kind of kickstarted where I thought I wanted to start my career and where eventually I ended up starting my career. So, that's me. That's me in a nutshell.
Fascinating. So that was an expat life as a very sort of impressionable young person. So that must have been quite a experience, no?
Yeah, I mean, so I'm one of three. I'm the youngest, so I've got an elder brother and elder sister. If you ask my dad, he says I was the best accident he ever had, because there is 6 or 7 years between me and my brother, and only 1 year between them. My brother and sister, and only 1 year between them two. But no, yeah, we moved out to that part of the world, as I said, when I was about 5 or 6 years old, and it was out to the Middle East. to Saudi Arabia initially, living in Dhahran. My dad was a mechanical engineer. He did an apprenticeship with Ingersoll Rand and then progressed through Ingersoll Rand to the point where he had an opportunity in that part of the world. We kind of traveled around the Middle East a little bit to where my dad's work took him. He changed companies a couple of times whilst we were out there. Eventually, he went to Flowserve and then ended up, I think, his career in the Middle East with the Rolls-Royce on the turbo machinery side of things. But yeah, we as a family, we started in Saudi, moved to Bahrain. We were in Bahrain for a couple of years. Then we went to Dubai for several years, and then eventually back to the UK for myself.
Wow. And back to the UK, back to Manchester, or?
Yeah, which was an experience for sure, because obviously I'd done most of my life growing up in the Middle East environment, and it's a very, very different culture and a very, very different life to what you might experience in the Manchester area. And I remember kind of the thing that really struck a chord and made me realize I was home was in the Middle East, certainly, in the 90s when I was there. Anybody who's experienced it, it was just you got a taxi pretty much everywhere, or you drove yourself, because taxis were so cheap because the petrol situation. Petrol was cheaper than not so much these days, I'm sure, but petrol was definitely cheaper than water. Like bottled water was more expensive. So you got taxis everywhere just because it was, if your parents weren't driving or anything like that or whatever, you jumped in a cab. And obviously, as a teenager in the UK, your main mode of transport becomes a bus. I know this makes me sound like some sort of, come off as some sort of very high class snob of some kind, which is not the case. But I'd never been on a bus, and I was 16 years old. Obviously I must have been in my early life before we left the UK, but I'd never been on one in my teenage years. And I remember the very awkward transaction of paying for a ticket and not having a clue what to do, and the bus driver thinking that I was clinically insane. Obviously picked that up very quickly and understood. But yeah, it was a significant culture shock to come back from that part of the world to the UK at 16 years old.
It's amazing, isn't it? Our family had a shorter experience in Africa. And, people will obviously say, oh, the weather. But you're right. It's other things that really challenge you because, the weather's the weather. But it's things like never being on a bus. I mean, that's kind of incredible, right? Because
Yeah.
when we were in Africa, taxis didn't exist. Really, not safe ones. Let's put it that way. Yeah, quite an incredible experience. Wow, that's amazing.
I always find it really funny you mentioned weather. And I would say to people and this is again later on in my career when I went out there for working, people would say, how do you deal with the weather? It's crazy hot in the summer. And it is. I mean, Doha, you can see temperatures of 48, 50 easy in the last week of July, first week of August. It's a very, very hot period. And I just used to say to people, well, I avoid the weather and the sun like you avoid the rain. You don't necessarily go outside and start dancing in it. I go from my air-conditioned car to my air-conditioned house to my air-conditioned office, back to my air-conditioned car, back to my air-conditioned house. And I don't particularly try and stand in 50 degrees for too long. So it's very interesting. There's so many aspects to the two different lifestyles that you have in those two different places.
Yeah, I mean, I remember, one of the things that we were afforded, and it was a real bonus of being, relatively senior management in Shell. Part of the expatriate contract in Shell was you had to be a member of a golf course.
Right. Okay.
Right? Yeah, you had to be. It was expected. And I remember joining a golf course very close to where I lived, and I remember the caddies all being stood under the shade of the trees when I first went, and I thought to myself, well, how silly! Why are they not stood out, enjoying the sunshine? I think within about 20 minutes, I totally got the whole piece, right? So I'm
you were
entirely
under
with
the
you.
tree with them.
You've got it. So I really recognise what you're saying. You sort of adapt to these things, don't you? So that's wonderful, wonderful. So we came back and we live in Manchester now, Mike.
Yes, yeah. So home is now Manchester. Me and my wife, obviously, when we moved out to the Middle East, kind of one of the key principles of being there was to save up to be able to buy a home that was ours. My wife was working as well. She's a teacher. Yeah, we went out there and we tried to save as much cash as we could, and ultimately managed to put a deposit down on a house. So we bought our current home in 2018, and it's still our home today. And probably after spending an awful lot of time on DIY over the past 4 or 5 years, it will be our home for the foreseeable.
Well, I think life's got like that, right? So
Yeah.
so that I mean, so that's great to hear. So I mean, I guess so much of this has influenced your sort of your way of thinking, and we'll come a little bit into that because it sounded as though you didn't have a choice, as you said, to become connected to the industrial world. But how did it happen?
And what I would say is, like, because of my dad's career in kind of the industrial and always being involved in mechanical engineering manufacturer, we would talk about it all the time. And I was always, he would travel around the world and travel to different places. And I was always kind of fascinated with that. And I'd always ask him about his journeys. And I suppose, our evening dinner meals would be like, okay, Dad, where have you been today? Where have you been this week? And we'd learn, he'd tell me all the stories and what he's got up to in all these different countries he's been to and who he's met. And that always kind of resonated with me and was something that I thought, hey, I wouldn't mind having that sort of life one day too. If I'm completely honest, there's a company when I first came out of university, I had an opportunity to potentially take some support, referrals, I should say, from my dad's network. But I was very much, no, I'm going to go do this on my own. Like, I want to go and do this on my own. And I attempted that, and I did that. And I say attempted because I went into a completely different direction. The very first job I had post grad was actually working for a company that specialized in software. Maybe that was probably one of my hobbies is like more tech and a bit of the geeky side of tech. So I was maybe that was what kind of drew me to that role. I interviewed, obviously everything went well, and I started it. And I think after about 3 months, I realized this was just not what I thought it would be. So made the decision. I remember having a very honest phone call, and I'll probably talk about my dad in this quite a bit because he is quite an inspiration in many aspects of my career. I remember having a conversation with my dad, and he said to me, "If you're not happy, it's fine. We'll sort it out. Like, we'll figure it out together. If you're not happy, don't do something you're not happy with doing." He said, "So if you really want to leave, and we'll sort it out. Like, one way or another, we'll figure it." And I kind of took that as like, okay, fine. And I did. And I left that role. I was then, okay, so what do I want to do? And I kind of went back into, well, what kind of really inspires me is kind of some of the stuff my dad's done. So I started looking at the opportunities there. There's a company where, again, I in this case, I did use one of my dad's contacts.
Why not?
Why not? They were there, and I had an opportunity to work for a local company that was a package integrator, but they had in the Caspian region, so in all the Azerbaijan, Kazakhstan, and all those sorts of areas, they had the agency agreement for some of the Gun Denver equipment in terms of compressors. So they used to do some packaging and ship them out to the region. And I worked as part of their project management team. And that was kind of my first introduction into the industrial sector. And it got its claws in me. That's it. I'm stuck now. I love what I do. I love all my jobs I've had. I've loved the career. But that's how it started.
Wow. Okay. Love it. That's great to take us back to that. And I have to say, thanks for sharing just how important your dad is to you. I feel very similarly about my father, really. I think not many steps I would have taken wouldn't have been influenced by him in some way or the other. So that's really great. And you said in the 5 from 5 that you sort of like your life is a bit dictated by toddlers. Is the toddler of shareable story age or still not?
Yeah, no. So I have my son. My son's 2.5. He is definitely runs the household. um, he's great. He was a long time coming. Me and my wife had a series of difficulties to be able to have him come along, and after many years of trying, we finally got successful 2.5 years ago. Definitely changes your life in so many ways, and I think the way I explain it to people is it's one of the hardest things I've ever had to do, but also the best. Like being a dad is challenging. There are lots of challenges for any parent. So being a dad is challenging, but it's also just the most incredible thing in the world.
Love it. I love that. I love that sort of complete view of the benefit, really. And I think that's important. I'm the father of three, and mine are much older,
Yeah.
and I still get so much joy from them. So that's really lovely. I mean, of course, in 2.5 years, he might be jetting off and living for the next however long in a foreign country. Who knows? Who knows?
Yeah, I mean, never say never. I think travel generally is something that's always appealed to me, be it for work or pleasure. And my wife has the same bug, the same itch. It's funny, there's an app that you can have called Bean, as in Been, and you can literally tap on a world map, all the countries you've been to. And we've both got like a bit of a challenge to ourselves that we've always been to more countries than age we are. And I think at the moment I'm tracking about 3 or 4 ahead, so I'm doing all right.
Oh, well done you. I'll look up that app. I mean, I've done it before. I've plotted it on a physical map where I've been. I guess I see the link. And yeah, again, with my career, I've been very fortunate. Been to a lot, but I wonder now on your measure, I wonder whether I am in a deficit now, as my age is sort of definitely creeping up. But lovely. I love that. So look, before we get into that international chapter, you mentioned that you studied business information, and that was at Huddersfield, right?
Yep, so that's at Huddersfield University. University's really interesting. It's one of the best times of my life, and I made some incredible friends at university who are still my best friends today. The course itself is one of those things that's really quite interesting. I think as I've kind of got a bit older and matured, I probably and there'll be certain people who will not, not in my life, not in the public, in my life, who won't be happy with what I'm about to say, but I probably didn't give my university as much attention as I probably could have in the moment. In terms of
The academic side.
yes, the academic side, yeah.
Right.
I mean,
Yeah.
I passed with decent grades, but I think there was probably a significant portion of my university life where I thought that was the secondary component. However, it was great, and the course itself was fantastic. I mean, business information management, it was like a mixture of business management, maths, and IT all combined, which it's really interesting because later in life and in my roles I'm in now has been absolutely perfect because a huge way of how it's not everything, it's my only path, but a huge way of how I judge my actions. And effective, that's actually the synopsis of the course. It is something I can't remember exactly word for word, but it was basically using data to change that into information and then use that information to drive knowledgeable decisions. It was basically the course definition. And now in my world where I'm looking at data daily and I'm looking at trends and patterns and understanding how things are going to be able to drive those decisions and make the right decisions, it was definitely the right course for me.
That's a real insight, isn't it? Because, I mean, it might not be a natural jump from business information to sales director, right? It might not be a natural jump that people would make. But I've often reflected back in that those in commercial roles that really can blend data and make it useful with behaviors and make them appropriate are probably the ones that find that magic middle ground, because without doubt there's an ocean of data, but understanding what is the most relevant and insightful is quite important. So you're really saying that this degree, whilst not your primary focus while you were there, uh, has consequentially helped and shaped the way you lead and solve problems at work, right?
Yeah, I mean, 100%. And not to do too much plugging whilst we're on here, but there's a book on your shelf behind you that actually talks about the blend, that blend, and how important that is. And yeah, I mean, definitely, it's so critically important to how I drive my daily activity. I think as I've become more senior in my career in the roles I've had, I think one thing that has become crystal clear to me is how powerful a strong performing team is, and how you can achieve that. And I'm touching on this subject now because I've been in different roles. I've worked in different companies where KPIs, metrics, and data are treated in so many different variations in so many different ways. And there are some people who maybe use that data to kind of almost beat you up a little bit, like hit you over the head with it and be like, hang on a minute, what are you doing? You're not doing it. It's not good enough. Be better. And that's about as far as their support or coaching goes. Be better. Your data is not good enough. And I think for me, it's always been so critical to be able to analyze that data and understand those trends so I can be the best version of myself as a manager to make my employee, my team be the best version of themselves as their position in the company. Because it's never a case of using that data to beat people up. And it should never be that way. For me, it's really important to identify if the data is going in the wrong direction, if the trends aren't showing what we want, then work with the team, understand, rationalize the reasons as to why we're hitting speed bumps, or we're not going the direction we thought we should. And that can be so many different things. That can be training requirements. It can be the tool. There can be a tool, a business-based tool that isn't being used correctly, or so many different other things. But for me, it has always been incredibly important to use data to drive the correct decisions, and that can really include how you drive your team and how you work with your team too.
No, I love that. I mean, I think that's really good. Considering it was a secondary outcome of a very influential part of your life, I think that's a great thing as a leader to take forward. I mean, I have to say, I do think any strategy that starts with sell more tends to be a bit lost before
Yeah.
before it comes out of the gate. But you're quite right. I do think many people have lost the art of the conversation around the data, because I think this becomes a very real issue in business. That just because we can measure it, it doesn't mean there isn't a conversation that needs to be had. Be it we're struggling, be it we're doing well. What really is the underlying reason underneath that data? So Huddersfield served you well.
It did, yeah. Like I say, the university experience was great. I made some fantastic friends. And bizarrely, as a man from Manchester on the other side of the Pennines,
Oh
I'm
yes.
constantly, for some reason, my career or choices of education keep taking me back to the other side of the Pennines into Yorkshire.
Yeah.
Very frequently, end up going back to Yorkshire for one reason or another.
Okay. And the Klüber head office, the Klüber UK office is where?
In Huddersfield.
There we go. Look at that. There's almost some serendipity there, isn't there? That
Yeah,
that, you,
yeah.
that you've ended up with that. Oh, that's fantastic. Well, that's really great to sort of reflect on how the education kind of connects back into your leadership, and it's a little bit around your learning and leadership. I want to just move to now. I mean, the world all of a sudden gets a bit bigger for some reason. You're now out in Doha. I don't know whether there's a story that got you there, but you're in Doha, and you're responsible for places at the time, I guess many of us never really heard of or knew of, right? Because the way we spoke about the world was so different. Qatar, Iraq, Lebanon, and Pakistan. So what were some of the reasons got you there? What were some of the learnings? Is there anything that you take away from that as crystal clear as you did the sort of Huddersfield experience?
Yeah, I mean, I suppose there's a couple of things that I would summarize that I took away. Definitely one of the things I would say that in my experience over that part of the world was one of the times where I really had a true man manager and someone who really worked with me. And I probably learned an awful lot of how to be a manager from my manager there at the time. That was incredibly insightful. But yeah, I mean, the experiences and how it all happened and all that. So an opportunity arose to join SPP. So I took that opportunity and kind of went out to that part of the world. Initially, when I got there, it was focus on Doha or Qatar and Bahrain. And a big piece of what I was focusing on in terms of an industry was a lot of my time was on infrastructure. And the reason for that was specifically Qatar in 2014-15 was undergoing lots of infrastructure work because they had a fairly important football tournament to prepare for. So they were completely revamping their entire infrastructure across the whole country. So this was HVAC, water treatment, and all that side of it. So obviously, in a hot, warm country, HVAC and air conditioning became incredibly important. But then a big piece of what the product that we had was that water treatment, so fresh water supply to homes and sewage treatment. I kind of got involved initially focusing on Qatar and Bahrain, but in my time there, one of the things that was identified was obviously Bahrain has the bridge, the causeway that connects to Saudi, for those who don't know. So we had a guy who looked after Saudi who was Arabic speaking because there was obviously a clear benefit to be Arabic speaking specifically in Saudi. And he started to look after Bahrain. I'd kind of started a few of like the approvals because in that part of the world, a lot of the work goes through like the local ministry. So I'd started that process and then kind of passed Bahrain to him. And then they were like, okay, well, look, things are looking like they're moving along in Qatar. We've got some other countries where we need some more. And then I took up some of those additional extended responsibilities. And it was such an incredible experience, And I do have an affinity to that part of the world. I do enjoy making relationships with the different cultures and different people in that part of the world. Probably one of my favorite places in the Middle East is Lebanon. I've used to love traveling to Lebanon. Beirut is one of my favorite cities in the world. And obviously, so we see a lot of stuff in the news at the moment, so it's quite tragic. But such an incredible city with such a brilliant culture and group of people. And I really enjoyed making those relationships and learning about the cultures. I mean, I never went into Iraq, but we had an agency that was based in Jordan that would sell into the projects into Iraq. And I would visit Jordan regularly to go and catch up with our agent and the team. And they had a couple of sales guys who I worked with very, very closely. Again, what an incredible country, Jordan. And the surrounding areas in Jordan, Petra is there. You got one of the wonders of the world is in that country. And I actually took it upon myself for me and my wife, we actually ended up having a vacation in Jordan, and it's one of our best memories we've ever had. And it's so bizarre because people ask me, "Oh, Mike, you've traveled a bit. Where's like one of your favorite places?" And I say Jordan, and they go, "What? Like, why?" And then I show them the photographs, and they're just blown away. It's an incredible experience. And I think what I kind of took away from being in that part of the world was how important it is to adapt and be diverse within yourself. I would deal with different nationalities, different cultures daily. These parts of the world, Doha, Dubai, they're commercial hubs. So you have, 20, 30 different nationalities on a project, and you're having to engage with all of them, loads of different cultures. And it was just fantastic. It was such a pivotal experience in my life to make me understand the greater view of the world, something that I look back on quite fondly.
Lower hit rates, missed targets, and no receptionist to patch you through because buyers decide before you arrive. Selling Lubricants Smarter tells Dan Wilder's story of ditching the old playbook. Qualify hard with SpanCop. Plan sharper meetings with Whopper. Use AI to move faster and turn technical expertise into clear outcomes buyers trust. Built on the buyer revolution research, it's a practical blueprint for modern lubricant selling. Search Selling Lubricants Smarter on Amazon and buy your copy today.
Thanks for sharing that with the Beyond the Blend audience, because I think, embracing diversity and actively seeking out opportunities to, immerse yourself in that is a real growth moment, isn't it? Because your view of the world isn't always the only view, right? And not often do we have that opportunity when we're in day to day, the cut and thrust of business to really reflect on diversity in all of its different aspects. but to see it so overtly in different cultures is, I mean, I've experienced it across my global time when I worked for Shell International, but to be in it every day and all the minutiae that you were, I can only imagine what a privilege that was. And I hear you almost, instead of focusing on the fragility of the region, you're focusing on the splendidness of the region, the greatness of what's going on out there. So your view is very much a positive one, isn't it, of that area?
Oh, 100%. It's a part of the world where, even though it's not home, I was always made to feel so incredibly welcome. You know, everywhere I went. I mean, not to be too positive on it, though. You know, you're not going to get on with everyone. So obviously, I had from time to time you come across difficult conversation or difficult people for sure. But you know, I would say the majority of my time over there was treated with so much hospitality from colleagues, friends, and friends is a really interesting point as well, because when you're in an environment like that, as you say, when you're in it, your friends become your family, because your family are thousands of miles away. So you live in the pockets of each other's house, and kids are running between houses. And, you know, you mentioned a golf club, you go to, local country club or whatever it is, you go there on weekends and you catch up, and your friends become your family. Yeah, I mean, for me, I look at that, my experience over there, and I look at that part of the world with, quite a high positive view on it all, and a very good experience.
I love it. I want to go back. I don't want to leave here just yet, because you said something that piqued my interest. You said that there was this moment that you really experienced the benefits of somebody caring for you. You said managing, the management side of things. I put that umbrella around as caring for you. Don't know if that is what you meant, but tell us about that, because if that stuck with you, and it still does because you brought it up in this conversation, what was that like? Was that somebody that was saying, "Right, I see your potential, Mike," or "I see your..." What was it?
It was a couple of different things really. There was always an open door, always, and whenever I needed any help or support, it was given freely, without even a thought. That resonated with me because it's really kind of shaped how I manage my teams throughout my career, and how I've managed people who reported into me is one of the same thing. It's a very I have an open door policy, and I suppose it's always very difficult because when you have like a manager, and in that particular instance, the manager was a manager, and he was firm with me when he needed to be firm with me, but he was also a friend. And I think that's very important. I think it's okay to be friends with people who work for you. I think that's perfectly okay. There are times, obviously, when you have to be a bit firm and make sure that the direction is still given, which, I have no issue doing that, maybe because I experienced it from other managers in the past, in this case that we're talking about now. But I think it's an interesting topic, because kind of things that I took away from that is the duty of care of a manager to their team. And I have a personal opinion that your duty of care to your team is not just 9 till 5. And I think that's something that's very important to me in the way that I work is, you know, I need my team when they come to work to give 110%. I want them to be able to give 110%, but sometimes that means being available, being flexible, supporting them with what might be going on outside of 9 till 5. I think that's something that I definitely learned because, again, in that part of the world, my mum, my dad, they're thousands of miles away. I was a young 25-year-old out in that part of the world at that time. And my manager supported me very closely and helped. And when I did have problems, it was a point I could reach out to. And I really appreciated that. And I think that, that's definitely given me something to think about on how I manage my team and how I support my team. And my team know, every certainly the past few roles I've had, everyone who reports to me, I've said, like, it's very important that you understand that, I'm here for everything work related. But if you have things going on outside and you want a unbiased opinion or a different point of view or someone outside of the situation to talk to, I'm here. And I think that's really important because I think there's there's a lot of managers, and maybe they wouldn't be a manager, because manager's probably like the most strictest version of the word I like. I like coach, I like leader, I like mentor. Manager's probably as strict as I go. And I've always said to people, don't call me a boss, because I'm not a boss. That's not a word to describe me. But I do think that there's a number of managers out in the world who maybe don't follow through on some of that duty of care. But and don't get me wrong, it's not completely selfless. I know that if I help these people and I help my team when they're having difficulty outside of the office, that when they do come to the office, they're given 100%. So there is that aspect of it. You know, it's not completely selfless, but I do want to, show support, and I learned that from that experience.
Then that's great, because these are all self-perpetuating things, aren't they? And because you'll be influencing others who will then in their careers go forward and behave in this way. And I think, just again, listening in for our audience, the learning here is one about, that being available, being accessible, actually genuinely caring when required. And the boundaries are clear, is what I heard you say, right? We can be friends, but we can tell each other when things aren't quite right. And I think that that's a great thing that you brought out of that culture, because I think, that is something that you can take forward as a forever attribute in that coach, leader, mentor, not boss approach. So we're out of the Middle East again, I think, and we're into Armstrong Fluid and technology, and is it Oliver Valves? These are brand new chapters. Probably we won't do them as much justice, because for some reason I don't sense them as glamorous, but they might well be. You might so know they were extremely glamorous. And so I guess what I'm trying to dig at, were there lessons that you learned there around sales leadership and customer focus, and what were these experiences here?
Yeah, I mean, Armstrong was a really interesting one. A Canadian business, a portion of the management are either Canadian or American, and obviously there are styles as well in that they bring to the table. And I think I learned an awful lot at Armstrong about sales process. They're quite a process-driven organization, and the sales process, commercial management, was something I really learned a lot about, in terms of the key stages of sales process. And also through that, I had learned, on things that I now adapt in my life today, is the good and the bad bits, because you learn from your own experience. No sales process, I think, for any organization is perfect. But by having exposure to various different sales processes across my career, I've been able to cherry pick the good stuff. I think Armstrong certainly gave me a lot of positivity and experience around what is a solid, good, robust sales process. Talking about like pipeline management, a key thing that I learned over there from a commercial director who I reported to for a period of time was the idea of sales velocity, which was completely new to me, but is something that I very much follow, and I've done a lot of research on since it was introduced to me. And it's a very interesting concept. So again, I don't know if you know about it, Steve, but something I'll happily share, because it might be beneficial for the listeners, is sales velocity. And if you literally type it in Google, sales velocity calculation, and click on images, you'll see loads of versions of the image. But it's effectively your number of opportunities times by your conversion rate, times by the value, divided by the length of the sales cycle. And then you get your sales velocity as a result, which is basically how quickly you're converting opportunities to cash. One of the things that I learned, this was something, like I say, it was completely new to me. I learned this for the first time whilst I was at Armstrong, and I have since, like I said, done a lot of research and tried to train myself around the concept. And it really boils down some key fundamentals for sales. And that's the top half of the equation you want to positively impact, and the bottom half of the equation you want to negatively impact. You want to increase your opportunities, your pipeline, quality opportunities, that is. You don't want to just go and put loads of rubbish in your pipeline. You want to increase your value. So this is, value selling, driving value into your product, increasing the value of your quotations, and ideally increase your conversion rate. and at the same time reduce the bottom half of the equation, which is the length of your sales cycle. And those can be internal reflections. Usually, that can be things like, how quickly does it take us to prepare a quote? How quickly do we respond to an inquiry? And that can be quite inward, where the top three are outward. And I actually summarize to my sales teams, if you're doing an activity that doesn't impact the top three positively, or the sales cycle reducing the time, don't do it. It's a waste of your time. Don't go and just have coffee and donuts, which is an interesting term used in my career. That's it's good. It's, relationships are good, and promoting and maintaining relationships is important for sure. But ask yourself as a salesperson, am I positively impacting the top or reducing the length of the sales cycle? And if I'm not, is this action that I'm about to do today really worth my time? Really, that is something that I learned. I learned the basics of it at Armstrong, but I've matured that in my own way since.
Yeah, well, Mike, thank you for taking the time to explain that out there, and really sharing with the listeners something that they could take away from this, right? Yes, they could Google it, but you've overlaid some very practical examples of what you can do. And as I sit here, having probably espoused to many people, sort of the top of the funnel being the critical point of the start of many journeys, i.e. the selection of the difference between a suspect and a prospect, and qualify hard early. It's great to hear somebody leading a significant organization talking very similar language. But what I really love about connecting parts of the story that we've gone through today, I'm already seeing through Sales Velocity that business information management degree coming through. Useful KPIs and not pointless KPIs. Coaching conversations around what's impacting our ability to influence one of the things that we want to influence, and your care that you put around making sure people are focusing on the right things and not wasting their times and effort. So I think it's a lovely way to, show how your career has progressed to these places. And one example, i.e. Sales Velocity, is how it manifests in Klüber today. So that's really great to hear. So as we come out of the space, and I guess just before we jump into Klüber, because we haven't even spoken about Klüber yet, by the way, I just want to jump into maybe the personal side before. I guess I don't see much in your social posts about the outside world. That might be a very deliberate thing. But I did see in the Huddersfield, there was a year in the rugby firsts. So I don't know whether is rugby still a thing that floats Mike's boat, or are there other things? You said technical geeking out. So what is all that?
Yeah, so no, rugby has been a massive part of my life. And I think I probably started playing rugby from about 8 years old. And I think I got into it very well, because I don't think it shows very well on this camera that I'm on right now, but I'm actually 6'4" and quite a broad unit, shall we say, in terms of my size. So rugby was a sport that I got into very early. It was always one that my dad used to enjoy. My brother played rugby before me. And I really got into it because, as I mentioned in my early life, I used to live in Dubai. And when I was in primary school, I actually played for my school's team in the Rugby Sevens tournament. So for those who know, Rugby Sevens is a tournament that travels the world. And it's interesting. I'm sure it's the same in other locations. I've only ever been to the Dubai Sevens. They do a tournament of basically every single age category, all the way through up to professional. So I used to compete in the junior leagues, the junior tournament. My very, very first proper rugby game, and there's a reason I'm telling the story this way, was in that tournament. And there's a photograph somewhere of me playing, and actually the pitch was a sand pitch, but there's a photograph of me playing. I maintained this height and this size from a very young age. I was probably at least 1 foot taller than everybody else on the pitch. And there's a photograph of about 3 or 4 other kids on like my legs, my shoulders, my arms. I've just got the ball and I'm still just kind of wading through. And the tournament was supposed to be like a 2-dayer. And then the next day when I came back, they came to me and said, you're going to have to put him in the older group. So I think I was like playing in like the under 7s or something. And they said, you have to go to the under 10s because you're just going to win every game. So so that was kind of like my introduction to rugby in a competitive form. And since then, I've played rugby all the way up until about 2 years ago. I played it all my life in some form or another, all through school, university, even post-university, played for a couple of local teams. Went out when I was back in Doha. Doha was a really interesting one. They had a league that was union rugby. I've only ever played union, so there'll be some people on here who watch this who'll currently be switching off the podcast as I've said that, I'm sure. So I've never played league. Yeah, they had like a union league or tournament system where there was about 4 or 5 different teams, and maybe in its best year there might have even been more. But there was teams, and it was really interesting how the teams were made up. So there was like a team of like people, expats from Fiji. There was like the French team, and it was all a team full of just French people. And then you had kind of our team that was just like Western expats. That was like Scottish, English, some South Africans in there, and so on. Some Welsh players and whatnot. And it was the reason it was so good and it was so much fun was because it used to be hosted at the rugby club. And on a weekend evening or lunchtime, you'd go to the rugby club. There'd be 3 or 4 games played back to back. There'd be a few hundred to 1,000 people there on the busiest times, and you'd play rugby. And like I said, I played it all the way up until a couple of years ago when I took a bit of an injury to my knee. I do want to go back. I want to get back in and play vets. I'm at an age now where I can play vets rugby, which is a lot better because I think one of the reasons I took an injury was because I was playing in the second team or third team for one of the local teams up here. And I'm playing against like 20-year-olds and 19-year-olds, and they're just running rings around me. So, yeah, I'd like to get back into it and play vets, I think.
Nice one. Well, there we go. So one of the things I'd love to see, and I don't know if it's even possible or you want to do it, but I'd love to see that photo of 3 people hanging off of you as you're running through the sand in Dubai. I can only imagine what a great photograph.
I'll try and dig it out.
photograph.
I think my mum might have it, so I'll try and dig it out.
Yeah, it'd be lovely to see. And yes, those folks listening in who you say might be switching off, maybe don't even know that there's a difference between union and league. So, but actually, yeah, it does polarize views. Well, thanks for sharing that side. I mean, I love that. And the fact that you still want to get involved with it, and now you're a vet. My goodness,
I know.
who would have thought you was even old enough for that? But I mean, what people won't have realized if they're listening into this is we had a bit of fun before we started about our chair heights.
Yeah.
And now
Sit
my mental perception is that you were not 6'4".
Yeah.
So there we go. You've already blown that one away. Mike, look, we're moving into the sort of current, and you're at Klüber and speciality lubricants, and with all this international experience, I mean, I guess I'd be interested, more of a future-looking view here. What are you seeing coming in the next 5 to 10 years with the technology, the regulations, customer expectations? What does the world for you look like, and for Klüber and the team?
So there's definitely all the things you just mentioned, technology, regulations are all a big part of what we do at Klüber's. One of our biggest markets is the food industry. And around that, we've got a lot of things happening globally at the moment when it comes to regulations. We often talk about things like Mosh Mower and topics like that. So that's definitely, and regulations and legislation is definitely going to play a part in how lubricants get into the market and what lubricants are allowed to be in the market, for sure. Klüber as a company do so much research. It's like, I don't know whether it's like incredibly impressive or borderline insane, but it's incredible, really. It really is. They have lots of research that they're able to do into how they manufacture the products they do to meet or even be in advance of those regulations. I think lubrication as an industry is definitely going to be subject to technological improvements and changes. I think, truly coming to a world of condition-based lubrication versus because the OEM manual says so is definitely something that is to be considered and to be looked at and taken seriously. And I think that, Klüber are doing a lot of activity around that as well. So yeah, I think the technology, the dosing points and dosing systems and how all that works is definitely a point of interest and something that the industry's gonna see more of.
Yeah, and the skills that people will need. Are you got a clear view of that? I mean, does it change? Does it? We've already spoken a little bit about IQ and EQ and the blending of. What are you seeing around what will make the successful skill set, I guess, in the industry?
I think there's two sides to it. I look at the industry as my whole career as, and this is one thing we didn't touch on earlier. My whole career has been 50-50 capital equipment, new business, and service and aftermarket. So I think that translates very well to the way in which kind of the lubrication industry, or certainly how I feel about it, is going. In that there are the sales team and the sales professionals, but then there's the service team and the service professionals, and they carry two very different skill sets, but they're both very, very important. I think there's a huge piece around the service element, the skill sets needed there. It's all about having the eye to identify on-site issues, on-site improvements, be a true partner to a customer rather than a box shifter. And that comes with certainly having a service eye and an on-site eye for understanding application and process. So I think that's absolutely critical as the industry goes forward. Equally is the salesperson. And the salesperson has, again, we have a lot of tools at our disposal as salespeople, CRMs, there's all sorts of different tools within the Microsoft suites and so on that you can utilize. And having the best way to utilize them to be able to drive the right actions whilst keeping that human point and touch is still very, very important. I'll touch on something my dad used to say, and I've said I'll mention him a few times through this, and I always remember he used to say to me, "You've got two ears and one mouth, so, listen." And that would be something that I think is incredibly important, not just in lubricants, but for any sales professional. That consultative selling, listen, understand the pain points. And I think that's an incredibly underrated skill for someone to have.
Yeah. I mean, thanks for sharing your viewpoint on that. I mean, you probably are aware we share similar insights through the Buyer Revolution research, where we put the lens of what buyers actually say. And the good thing is, what you describe is what they want. So I always think if we're going down those paths, that's a great thing. But the thing that I just want to underline here is the two lanes that you spoke of there. They only work with the right leadership, right? So if they're both driven by sell more strategies that we spoke about before, they fail. But if they're supported by leaders who want to lead and coach and mentor, then I think we've got more of a chance to help, because they're slightly more long-term plays, aren't they, than the short-term box shifter that you introduced us to.
Yeah, yeah. And I think that's just, it's self-explanatory for the most part, but it's so important. It's so vital.
Look, Mike, we are coming to the end of our time together, and I think there are stones we could have turned and opened up there. But look, thanks for taking us through those the beginning, really. The 5-year-old that left these shores, came back as a 16-year-old, from Doha to Manchester, first experiencing a bus journey, and really seeing how that culturally played out. But you shared with us how you've taken KPI insights, how you've taken leadership from managers that have influenced you, and how you overlay that into your leadership DNA through your jobs, and currently leading the efforts in the Klüber team. But if I was to ask you for one more piece of advice, you've been very generous, but there's a 20-year-old now that's sat on a bus for the first time, wondering, what they might do to build their career. Would there be that evergreen piece of advice that you would give them that maybe comes from you, or even, dare I say it, your dad?
Yeah, I mean, I think I've always kind of very been of the opinion of commitment and hard work is one of the most utmost things that anybody can do to be able to progress and develop themselves. It's a tricky world out there to be able to get into the role that you want to have. And I understand that, young people will definitely have some struggles there. But one of the things that I can say in terms of helping there is find the right recruitment team to support you, find someone who genuinely has your best interests at heart, and get yourself into the role. That bit I'll close because that's not really my area of expertise. But what I will say is when you get that role, when you're in it, just commit and put the effort in and listen. And hopefully if you've got a manager and a leader there listening to you who's willing to invest into you, then that commitment and that hard work won't, one, go unmissed, and two, should be used by your manager to help develop you further and identify paths and areas for you to grow. And I think there's an element of all of it, and all of our life, there's an element of luck, and that's timing and place. However, I've always been a very firm believer of you create your own luck. So don't be shy, go out there, create it. And I'm sure that anyone who wants it hard enough or wants it enough, it will come.
Thank you for that, because that isn't in a textbook, right? That's something that's been lived and observed, and I echo that. There will be a bit of luck, but commit to it. That really is a very insightful piece, and I thank you for that. And I have to say, you shared so much with us during our conversation today. It's been wonderful for me to get to know you, and for our audience, I'm sure, to have heard more from Mike. And if they wanted to follow the Klüber journey, your journey, where would people find you, Mike? Where would they go?
The best place is on LinkedIn. That's kind of the primary point to be able to follow me, engage with me. By all means, anybody's got any questions, or if anybody's liked anything that I've said today and wants some advice, please do reach out. I'm more than happy to be able to give some pointers and tips.
Look, Mike, thanks again for joining us on Beyond the Blend. It's been an absolute treat to have had this conversation with you, and we'll see you again on the next Beyond the Blend.
Lubricant Expo Europe is back at Messe Düsseldorf for its 5th year, taking place September 15 to 17, 2026. Lubricant Expo Europe is a must-attend annual event for professionals looking to discover or promote latest advances in lubricant and lubrication technology. Whether you're an engineer, executive, or industry professional, this free-to-attend exhibition and conference connects lubricant solution providers with end-user buyers and the entire chemical and equipment supply chain, with over 320 exhibitors including Klüber, Petro-Canada, Afton, Infineon, Lubrizol, Castrol, Total Energies, Brooker, and many more. Join us and see for yourself.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Beyond the Blend. Be sure to follow us to catch next and future episodes as we continue to explore the people within the lubricant market.